Hello, Curt Bragg here, Family of Faith Community Church, coming to you with this week's Reflect. And this is where we reflect back on this week's service, Sunday's message. And and one of the other things I see that is important is tying some of these messages together, because really it's about moving forward and growing in the Lord. And even though these messages stand alone, and sometimes Pastor Osway will do a series, or somebody else will do a series, but for the most part, it's one message a Sunday and on to another message. However, we need to look, as those messages are being preached. We need to remember what over the course of time here, the last few weeks, some of the messages were, because they really, and the Lord always sets this up really well. They complement one another, I guess is the best word for that. And so and they continually building. So anyway, this week's message, Becca Talkington, elder, talked on and preached on waiting and hope, and really a lot of content there. A lot of is a really good message, and I encourage you to listen back to it. And we're going to do some highlights about it today. But in previous message we talked about reaping and sowing, and how how that what you put in the ground is what you're going to get, and so forth. Well, that goes right into today's topic, where we talk about waiting and hope. And so, a farmer puts a seed in the ground, and then they have to wait. They have to wait for the harvest. And so it's important that we understand that there's things going on during that waiting, and we may not be able to see them. And the hope is, that we're going to have a good harvest, right? And so, and that's how that relates to the reaping and sowing. And so, when a farmer puts it in there, they're not putting it in there saying, well, I may, they're not putting corn in the ground saying I may get apples, and they're not putting corn in the ground and saying, well, I hope that I get one or two, ears of corn. They're hoping for a bountiful harvest. And so going back to the message, when it talks about when Becca was talking about hope, and how it is not just being optimistic about the situation. And that's kind of difficult for me, because I'm an optimist, and I see things that way. I see the glass half full type of thing. And I understand to where there is a conflict there between hope and optimism, and how they're not the same thing, and that we can sometimes look at them as being the same thing. We can look at somebody that is very optimistic and think that they're large in faith and very hopeful, and that's not always the case. I think the best example of that would be Abraham and Sarah. Abraham was given a word of God, and that word, and so many other words, had waiting attached to it. So he gave him the promise of many nations, a promise that he would have the descendants of and have descendants of the seed of the the sand of the ocean, and he'd be the father of many nations, and so that was the word. And so the hope was that he was going to then have a son, or to carry on that promise. Well, optimism, as was even mentioned on Sunday, a lot of times adds in what we can do. Adds in what can we do to help out the word of the Lord, right? Now, don't get me wrong, we have to mix our faith with works, right? However, we have to understand what the Lord is requiring of us to do, and what we're supposed, or what he's going to take care of. And in this case, Abraham and Sarah, Abraham tried to create a nations on his own by his relationship with Hagar. So that was more of an optimistic point of view, and the best example I could come up with. However, there's many more, but that was one that I thought was really good about how we try on our own and to get the results that the Lord was promising us. And that's really where hope is. Hope is a promise of God, and we're looking for those results, and sometimes we manifest a certain portion of that on our own. And what happened there? That was the wrong way to go about it. We see that in the scriptures, and there has been and always will be a conflict, and problems arose because of that. And so, it's important that we wait on the Lord, but when we're waiting, there's things going on. There's always different types of hope with waiting attached to it. We can look at Noah as an example. Now Noah, he was told to build the ark and waiting on the rain, and building as he goes and hoping that he finished in time and all that, but yet still it had never rained, right? So and he was getting persecuted and punished and kind of pretty much tortured for his hope, his faith in the fact that it was going to rain. And but he continued doing what he was told to do and exactly how he's told to do it during the time that he's waiting. And that's important. That's important. As a farmer puts the seed in the ground, he's still got to till the ground. He's still got to take care of the seed in as much as he can. However, he's supposed to do what the Lord has told him to do. And so, what happens when a situation where we do get out of faith, out of hope, we get into our own scenario like what I mentioned with Abraham? Because one of the things that Becca had talked about was seed falling on good ground, stony ground, seed falling on ground that where the thorns would choke out the seed, and that's how our heart has been prepared. But I look back and I say, you know what? There's times in my life when I feel that the ground, my heart was right, and I received, and I had the fortitude and faith to wait for the harvest of that seed, and did that properly and had a bountiful harvest. There's been other times throughout my life that I haven't. And so I think sometimes we look at that as we're either one or the other. But I think sometimes we go through these seasons that we can be kind of, we're not supposed to have a hardened heart towards something. But if we do, the results may be we may have some bad fruit, or not as much fruit in that situation. But more than that, I think that we need to focus on how to get the ground right and prepare ourselves prepare the soil for the seed. And I think that's where it comes in, because we can easily get in a situation where we really feel like we're hopeless because I look back and I can see that I've got a hard heart in that area, so I must be that person that's mentioned right there in the Bible, right? That must be me. Well, is it really? So you have to take things as a whole, and you have to look at the fact that what what are we supposed to do, and what's the Lord's responsibility? We're supposed to prepare the ground, and He will provide the increase. The Lord gives seed to the sower. So we know the scripture as it relates to that, but a lot of times we're just looking at one part of that. And sometimes we can be overly judgmental on ourselves, and we should judge our own heart in a sense that we're trying to make a change for what the Lord wants us to do. But the key point is to do what the Lord's told us to do, and continually do that until He's tell us to do something different. So when He tells us to do something different, when our waiting becomes a fruitful harvest, and sometimes in between that, He may give us something else to do. And so, another example that I reflected on was the children of Israel. They were held captive, but then when they were freed, when Moses led them out of Egypt and they were free, it still wasn't all. Everything wasn't completed yet, and they waited. They wandered around for the promised land. Well, some of that was in their own doing. The time was extended because of some of their habits and some of the things that they've taken on themselves. And so sometimes we wander aimlessly, and our hope seems to be like that's never going to come to pass. Our hope's extended. The goal has been extended out beyond our visual expectations, and then we become less hope or hopeless in that case. And so we need to make sure that we're doing what the Lord's told us to do. Then the actual prize or the finish line doesn't move. You may not be able to see it right away, but if we're doing what the Lord's told us to do, there's hope in that. Not self-hope, not optimism, as brought up, but there's hope because the Lord said it. He will bring it to pass. And that's why if we mix in what we do, well, can we hope on what we do? Probably not. It's probably going to lead to failure. And so we need to do all we can do and allow the Lord to do what He's supposed to do and what He says He's going to do, and watch and wait for that harvest. So hope this makes sense and you enjoy it. Have a good week.